interim deputy country representative, and I will be working with my colleague, whom I will be inviting in very soon. Thank you. within the time. I want to recognize the arrival and the presence of the different ambassadors from Japan. You are most welcome. The ambassador from Sweden, you are highly welcome, Your Excellencies. The ambassador from Norway, you are most welcome to this event. Thank you for honoring our invitation. We also acknowledge the presence of the heads and deputies of the different corporations from Germany, from Belgium, Ireland. We highly acknowledge and appreciate your presence and honoring this invitation today. We also acknowledge the arrival of the heads of different UN agencies. Thank you once again for turning up to this occasion as we launch our strategic plan, our strategic note 2022 to 2025. Thank you once again. And at this very time, I want us to welcome one of the young girls who is a contemporary musician to entertain us in one song, and then later on I'll come back along with my colleague to inform you of what next we'll be diving into. Thank you.
Say close your mouth about the things going on in your area, girl. They say you're too weak, too vain to care. They say your heel's too high, your skills too low for you to know. Well, that's just what they say. But who is this African girl? Who is this Ugandan girl? Tell me, who is this African girl? Yeah, do we know, do we know, do we know, oh, do we know, yeah, that it's too much for her to bear? When we say that she's too dumb to display her hair. Oh, see, I know that she's much more than what she wears. This I know, oh, I know, oh, yes, I know. Can't you see I am this African girl? Oh, yes, I am this Ugandan girl. Hey, yeah, I am this African girl. Yeah, now you know, now you know, now you know, so now you know, oh, teach me my 1, 2, 3, yeah, and give me that ABC, yeah, oh, how I long to be much more than anything, way more than everything. Won't you just let me be? All my African ladies in the building, good morning. I am this African girl. Yeah. I am this Ugandan girl. Oh, now I am this African girl. Yeah. Let me know, let me know, let me know, oh, let me know, oh, and empower this African girl, yeah. Empower this Ugandan girl, oh, empower this African girl, yeah, till she knows, yeah, till she knows. fools, yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Afri, and have a lovely, lovely day.
Thank you so much for such a great entertainment. I once again want to take this opportunity to recognize the presence and arrival of the ambassador from Austria. Thank you so much for honoring this invitation. We appreciate your support to the advancement of gender equality and women empowerment in Uganda and the world over. It's because of your investment that we have seen lives being transformed in this country, the lives of women and girls with issues that relate to gender equality and empowerment of women. At this very time, I want to invite a young leader who is going to give us a very short speech on what she thinks on behalf of other young women and girls on the vision that relate to gender equality and women empowerment in Uganda. She's coming from one of our implementing partners that we have been working with that has seen a movement of young girls voicing out issues that relate to gender equality and ensuring that these issues are embraced within the different works that we do. This is none other than Nampeja Claire, who will be coming in to give a short speech. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize the arrival of the representative from EU delegation. You are most welcome. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize the arrival of our resident coordinator in Uganda. Your Excellency, you are most welcome. I take this opportunity to recognize the arrival of our director from UN Women Global Office, that's headquarters. Madam Sarah, you are most welcome. I recognize the arrival of the interim head of agency, UN Women Country Office in Uganda, Adekemi. We recognize your arrival. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Nampeja Claire. Thank you.
The ambassador, the UN director, protocol observed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nampeja Claire. I'm a young woman born and living with HIV. I am 25 years old. I have a bachelor's degree in social work and social administration. I'm doing my master's in social work and social administration at Makerere University. I have been empowered right from the start. I am an advocate for change for young people living and affected with HIV. I have been humbled and grateful to be on different platforms, both national and international, to raise voices of other young leaders. I'm happy to tell you that I have been empowered by an organization called the Uganda Network of Young People Living with HIV. It's called UNIPA, where UN Women picked me up because of the resilience and the interest I had to voice out other people's young voices. UN Women phoned me at a time when I needed it, at a time when I had all the interest to voice up different voices in different platforms. In 2018, I was given an opportunity to represent my country, Uganda, in the first youth conference in Nairobi, where different young leaders and women came and shared different experiences they have been doing to impact their communities. Here I got an opportunity to interact with different young people around the world, which impacted me to come back in the community and share the good news that I got from there. I'm happy to tell you that the CBO I lead in one of the organizations that I volunteer with, we have done a lot, right from the skills that I attained from that conference. The following year, 2019, I was privileged to be part of the Beijing 25+ gender equality in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, where still we met different mentors that started the gender equality, race, and this also impacted us and different young people that represented my country. I'm happy to tell you that right now my name has been nominated for the leadership and mentorship program that is yet to run under UN Women. I'm here to tell you that young people face, especially young women, a lot of challenges. Teenage pregnancies is at a rise because of poverty. Many young women give their bodies out because they want to get 500 Ugandan shillings to buy a chapati for lunch. It's not because they want it, but because for survival. Young women are violated sexually because of different circumstances that they face in their communities. Young women have been discriminated as who live with HIV. I remember at some point at school, I felt like I didn't want to study again because of the stigma I interfaced during school. But because of resilience and because I saw my life somewhere, I was strong enough to take up the opportunity and study. But it's not like everyone was resilient like me that could take up. Many dropped out of school because they could not have a sanitary towel during their menstruation period. It is even still happening now. Our call to you, dear leaders who are here. When I was in high school, a law came and our government promised us that the prices for sanitary pads were going to go a bit down, such that even the last person can access a sanitary towel. But still, prices are going high, which means we are going to have more challenges, school dropouts, and teenage pregnancies again. Our call to everyone as young leaders is to engage us in all steps of planning, budgeting, implementation, such that we don't miss any step under in different ideas and raising our voices. We appreciate you for the platforms given to us, but many voices out there that I'm representing today, they feel that they are not engaged in each and every step. Sometimes they are called during implementation, sometimes they are called during planning, sometimes they are called during budgeting, but they request to be engaged in each and every step at any level. Yes, we understand sometimes some projects or some engagements come with qualifications, but at least there is, at least if the laws or the orders can really be a bit down and every person can get the chance to be part. Many times we are given shadow platforms. Despite our willingness to learn, we are all equal and prone to challenges or poor decision making. Yes, for the organization I represent, we say that our theme for this year is saying, we have the voice, pass us the mic. I'm happy that I have the microphone now. There are many voices that might not get this microphone that I'm having right now. But the platforms might be there, but still they're not their voices might not be heard. So we don't want to be in shadow, even when that space is being given to us, but we want to come out to the light to ensure that our voices are heard and change is really seen. We call upon international bodies, the government of Uganda, CSOs, and all stakeholders to stand and make our world a better place for both women and for both women and men, girls and boys, and we achieve a world free from discrimination for God and my country.
A big applause to Claire Nampeja. Thank you so much. Once again, I want to appreciate you for turning up in such a big number and as early as this morning. And above all, thank you for supporting and investing into the mandate of UN Women in Uganda that is geared towards ensuring that we realize and achieve gender equality and empowerment of women in Uganda. I want once again to recognize the presence of our different representations from the civil society organizations that we work with. Thank you so much for turning up. The different international NGOs, the private sector, and the media. Thank you for coming in and being part of this launch. And on a special note, I recognize the representation from the different government agencies. I've seen representation from the Ministry of Defense, from the Office of the Directorate of Public Prosecution. Thank you so much for turning up into this event. So we have a very short documentary that is going to show some of what we do, some of those that we are ensuring that we have to advance in the next strategic period. It's a 10-minute documentary, and I'm going to request our media team to play it, and then shortly I will come back and we move ahead with our program today. Thank you.
Is helping us to wake up to the existing gaps and find out strategies of how we can really strengthen the linkages in terms of different databases, data sets talking to each other. Both are been a partner since 2018. We sit in funding under the UN Spotlight program. Initially, a widow, the law talks about a widow, doesn't talk about a widow. It's not automatic that God forbid I die, my husband should automatically take over my estate. So now the law which was assented to is more progressive. So as women's movement, we celebrate that because it means we're making progressive. And women was at the forefront in supporting this piece of legislation. As a prosecutor, I have undergone trainings that not only get knowledge about this video and a victim-centered approach, but I've now also mastered teaching to other things. Human rights as to roll out the plea bargain guidelines, and this has been very, very key in implementation of the process of plea bargaining. Before their trainings, we did not seem to have a chance to explore different approaches in this process. When we have these trainings, we have achieved a standard for we got the skills on how to mediate conflicts. We also started moving the community to mediate conflicts in families, in the neighboring districts. We conducted community dialogues with different sectors. After the training, women opened up and they went for politics. We find that there are women now in decision-making place. We need to involve more women to come to be engaged in this kind of project, to empower them.
Diversify our business. So with that, I started adding on other businesses. I started selling silverfish. Now I'm also a supplier, yet before I was just selling retail.
Women has been able to support NAPED and grassroots women in seeing how they can use their capacity in the conflict prevention, but to address issues of climate change and natural resources governance.
This is the UN supported projects aimed at engaging women to produce commercially fruits and syrups. And it's a project that is targeting vulnerable women who have for long suffered from the insurgency.
I came from Uganda in 2016 in the refugee settlement. I was using only local language. I was not speaking in English. By the time when I arrived in Bibidi, I was even traumatized. From there, I suffered a lot to get access to the services I need. It was very hard because of the language. I was only using local language. Then from there, I start to help myself and my family, also my community. Through in terms of interpretation, when I go to the health center, I will explain my sickness to the doctor in English well, and doctor will understand me. That's my target is I must empower also my fellow colleagues who are in the settlement to be like me, so that they bring up their family. In taking leadership position, we must not fear. We have to take these positions together with men so that we make decisions with them. And my message to my colleagues who are also like me in the settlement, we have to empower each other.
Before I was trained, I didn't know some types of violence. I only knew common ones that I experienced in the community. That is physical violence, it is exercising physical fights in the community, and then sexual harassment, where women are raped. Those are the only types I knew that they exist. But after the training, I came also to realize that there were other types of violence. That is emotional violence, where someone is violated in mind, especially in mind. I didn't know there are also those kind of, it was a type of violence. I think it was just a mind, it was just a normal kind of situation.
Empowering the women's status without having the man involved comes as a service to the women, because
the men in the region are not they're used to having the power there. So when we have like a training like this, we bring the men on board and invite them. So they come and attend the training together with the women. And then in this way, we give them to be able to talk about everything from household economy, what a successful household looks like, the importance of getting your own treatment. Because the women were reporting, my husband doesn't want to start in line to get the ARVs. He waits for me to get mine and then we share at home. And that becomes like a drug and a message. They're able to appreciate that empowering the woman is empowering the whole household.
In terms of culture, there are those things that have been proven harmful. Male and female humans, because we seem to have looked at females as the lower sex. So we've taken our communities through to make sure they recognize the girl child as a very important person. So we are saying no to female genital mutilation. We are saying no to this forced marriage. Women opened our eyes. They added to our thinking in terms of giving the right humanistic approach to this cultural institution. So you and women gave us the light, and we realized that this is not something you can attain in a short time. These are things that really we keep engaging. They are very, very good partners to us. And the 3-4 years we've been together, we've made a great milestone.
With the support of you and women, we have also been able to implement our prime campaign, that is the White Plus Beauty Project, a campaign that works to bring together young people living with HIV to appreciate their status, their HIV status, but also use it to work with the community to address that issues. And I must say that this is one unique campaign that brings together both the women and girls to work with the other gender, the male companions as supporters to speak for the issues that are important. Through the White Plus Beauty Pageant, we've been able to see that those girls and young women take spaces, advocate starting from grassroots level to community, district level, to regional level. We had young people speak at the different international conferences. We had young people lobby at district level. We had young people take leadership on celebrating that 2 days in the district. What does this mean for those girls and young women? It means recognition, it means support, make decisions, it means leadership. And that's what we want to see for those girls and young women, their ability to live to the best of their ability.
Thank you so much, media team and our communications team, for putting together a highlight of what we stand for in this country and what you as our development partners, our implementing partners, and the rest of the allies have been investing into in ensuring that we advance gender equality and women empowerment in this country. I want to take this opportunity to welcome Kemi, who is the interim head of agency, country representative for Uganda, to invite the next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here and to receive you at this very important launch that we have today. I have the pleasure and the privilege to invite to the podium Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Sweden to Uganda, Ambassador Maria Hawkinson, to make her remarks at this occasion. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you. dear distinguished colleagues, ambassadors, resident representative, heads of agencies, government representatives, civil society representatives, and I think I will use my favorite expression here, all protocols observed. It's a real privilege to be here at this important launch today, and it's really good to see so many people here at this event. And I think many of you have maybe heard this, if not from me, maybe from my predecessor, that gender equality is a really integrated sort of in our bloods in Sweden, I would say, though of course it's not always been the case. We also have had a long way to go. But today we have what we call a feminist foreign policy. We have a feminist government for the first time actually headed by a Swedish female prime minister, but even previously stated with the aim to ensure that women and men have the same power to shape society and their own lives. And we do that through working through rights, representation, and resources. But today I'm here more to speak about UN Women specifically. And Sweden work with UN Women both globally. We have a new multi-annual agreement between UN Women and Sweden globally. But we also have an agreement here in Uganda between the embassy and UN Women Uganda on core support, which is a non-earmarked support. And this, of course, illustrates Sweden's deep trust in UN Women as an organization, but obviously also comes with lots of expectations that these agreements are translated into political initiatives and returns of mutual benefits for UN Women, Sweden, and of course, mostly for gender equality. And we find that our non-earmarked support to UN Women in Uganda is a very effective way to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment in the country. And I think this documentary illustrated very well some of the outcomes of UN Women's work and our collaboration. And maybe just to highlight a few points of the strategic note and also why Sweden find UN Women such an important organization to work with. So firstly, the convening role of UN Women among civil society actors, important in the work for gender equality and making sure that we all are working for the same goal, increased gender equality and fulfillment of access to democracy and human rights. This we have to do together as women, as men, and as human beings. We're also very happy to see increased focus on climate integration in UN Women's new strategic plan. And we look forward to see how UN Women can step up the work in this regard. And since social, political, and economic systems are historically based on patriarchal structures, a feminist perspective is needed to analyze and solve also environmental problems. Women are being hit harder by the consequences of the crisis, and more women need to take part in negotiations in the development of possible solutions. And we are very eager to work even more closely with UN Women on this topic, not least as we are moving closer to both CSW 66, but of course also Stockholm Plus 50 now in June. We also are very happy to see the increased ambition to work with the concept of leave no one behind, which is important in all working areas mentioned, and something we have been pushing for in many years, and we see now it's getting attention also in the strategic plan. And the work for the inclusion of minorities is something we attach great importance. UN Women addresses the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected women and girls severely, as evidenced in the worsening trends regarding, for example, increased gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, child marriages, and school dropout. COVID-19 impacted social services, including HIV, sexual reproductive health, maternal and child health services. And I would like to here specifically underline the work for sexual and reproductive health and rights as fundamental to health and well-being, gender equality, democracy, peace and security, and sustainable development. It's grounded in the right and the ability of all individuals to decide over their own bodies and to live healthy and productive lives. And gender equality and sexual reproductive health and rights goals are mutually reinforcing. And we are also happy that we here in Uganda work with a joint program between UN Women and UNFPA. Unfortunately, gender-based violence has increased sharply during the pandemic. It's been called a shadow pandemic. And we know also that UN Women has done important work on statistics, which we think is very important. And it's because of that that we actually know that 45% of women has been subject to direct and indirect violence during the pandemic. And without having the facts and the statistics, it's very difficult, of course, to address the right to healthcare and other support that follows from that. And I perhaps also say that we are particularly happy to see some support from Sweden through our JPO in the field of statistics. Also just to going forward and looking a little ahead, where digitalization is a both risk and opportunity, offers opportunities for global collaboration and to reach out with advocacy work to change norms. And we know that digital technologies has become increasingly important for young people to access education, high quality jobs, markets, gender-based violence services, etc. in Uganda. But we also know that less than 1/3 of Uganda's female population use the internet and to have or have access to mobile phones compared to 69% of men. So here we still have quite a huge gap that needs to be addressed. And we also unfortunately have seen that digitalization also have meant that gender-based violence has moved online and also targeting many women and girls. Finally, I would just want to also underline the work that needs the involvement of men and boys as important, also including traditional leaders and faith-based organization. And we are very happy to see UN Women taking aboard also this. And I've already had the privilege to participate in discussions on this and with traditional leaders and very many progressive faith-based organizations. And we feel that this is a very well invested efforts. I will not go into some of our higher results we see because the documentary showed. I would just say congratulations to be at this point. We are very happy to be a core partner of UN Women and we look forward to continue our work for gender equality here. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your very important remarks. UN Women receives very critical, flexible funding from Sweden annually that gives us the opportunity to play our role in the country, and this is so critical. And it enables us to reach the farthest behind, and which is important for the gender agenda across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I would at this stage like to invite to the podium the resident coordinator of the United Nations here in Uganda, Susan Ngongi. Please put your hands together for her. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, all senior government officials present with us today, heads of diplomatic missions, my own UN colleagues, and a special mention to Sarah Hendricks, who is the Director of Policy and Programs, UN Women, who is visiting today. Thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning once more. The theme for today's launch is We Empower. I think it speaks not only to the work of UN Women, but also an aspiration for all partners in Uganda. I was delighted to see the powerful images of women in the reception. It gives us hope that we are seeing women grow and move into spaces where they have not always been traditionally embraced in. And this is what we hope to and need to see going forward for Uganda to inclusively develop and achieve the aspirations of the SDGs, as well as Uganda's own planning instruments, NDP3 and Vision 2040. The UN system in Uganda recognizes and applauds the government of Uganda for their commitment to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. Uganda has made important gains in recent years, including now 46% women in cabinet. But of course, on the road towards women's empowerment and our development aspirations, many challenges remain, and some have already been mentioned, including violence against women, teen pregnancy, and women's economic empowerment, or a deficit of women's economic empowerment. The UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework 2021-2025 was adopted in Uganda to pull together our collective actions towards transformative and inclusive governance, shared prosperity and healthy environment, and human well-being and resilience. As with UN Women's strategic note, UN agencies have aligned their work in country around these strategic priority areas, which are in turn aligned to NDP3 and the SDGs. Gender equality and women's empowerment is core to the UN's work. We already know, and we keep saying it, we cannot achieve the sustainable development that we dream of without it. As such, our cooperation framework not only includes a dedicated outcome on gender equality and human rights, but these are also strongly mainstream across all the other areas of work. Advancing gender equality and women's empowerment has been catalytic in bringing the UN together. For example, through the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative to eliminate violence against women and girls, the joint programs on gender-based violence and sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the joint program to end child marriage, among others. The UN country team has identified advancing gender equality and eliminating gender-based violence as a key flagship area as we implement our cooperation framework. UN Women plays a critical role in supporting the UN system on gender equality and women's empowerment. I'm pleased to see that this coordination mandate is recognized as a cross-cutting outcome in their strategic note. When UN Women transitioned from UNIFEM in 2011, it was endowed with this specific coordination mandate. As we look at the direction of the UN system in the context of the UN reforms today, we are moving towards increased coherence towards our UN policy advice to governments and coherence in our UN programs and greater accountability for results. That is very much what UN Women's work aspires towards, supporting the UN policy and program coherence for greater results for women and girls across Uganda. In Uganda, UN Women has provided innovative coordination support to my office, for instance, at a sub-national level. UN Women has been supporting the UN area coordination teams. UNCT in Uganda is one of the first country teams in the world with a specific gender parity strategy and action plan, which will promote women's leadership within the UN system in Uganda itself. So in future iterations, maybe in 2 years, please ask us how we're doing on that plan. As a coordinator, allow me to speak for coordinators. The nature and results of coordination work is not always visible, and so can be poorly invested in. Coordination helps to minimize the conflicts, the rivalries, the wastages, delays, and other organizational challenges that we find in all organizations. It is critical to improving efficiencies in the UN system and for improved results on the ground, on gender, and across all other areas of work, so that we can achieve greater results for our efforts. If we put in the same amount of efforts, if it's coordinated, we get better results, as opposed to if it's not coordinated. Almost 20 years ago, Kofi Annan noted there is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. These words, sadly, as relevant today as they ever were, and also serve as a reminder that for too long we have failed to fully utilize women's empowerment as a tool for inclusive and sustainable development. We have been making development progress, obviously, but I don't think we've reached the transformation that we dream of reaching. So my hope is 20 years from now, when those who come after us are here in a similar meeting, this is not the quote that they will find. They will find some other more relevant quote, because we would have made so much progress along this area. So with that, thank you very much. We're grateful that we're here, and we're grateful for the partnership that we have.
Thank you very much, Susan, for your very important remarks. When different parts of the multilateral system work together effectively, obviously we deliver greater results, and we appreciate your leadership of the UN system, which is very effective, and we have seen more of that in recent time. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite to the podium. While we were speaking, we were joined by the Honorable Minister of Gender and Culture, and I would like to invite her to the podium. She is representing the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Betty Amongi. I would like to invite to the podium Honorable Peace Mutuzo to make her remarks this morning. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Madam.
I think I can comfortably remove my mask. And we're survived COVID. Where we are is not very, very bad. And I want to congratulate you about that. The UN Global Director of Policy Program and Intergovernmental Division, Sarah Hadricks, Your Excellencies, the ambassadors and high commissioners, UN resident coordinator in Uganda, Her Excellency Susan Ngogi Namondo, yeah, right. The heads of UN agencies, representatives of government, ministries, departments and agencies, representatives of development partners, representatives of civil society organizations and women organizations, representatives of private sector organizations, the academia, the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development and my own behalf, I wish to congratulate UN Women, Uganda, for this great milestone of launching the new strategic note for the period 2020-2025. I'm honored to have been requested to deliver this keynote address as part of the event to commemorate this achievement. I wish to convey greetings from my senior minister, Honorable Betty Amongi, the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, who is away on official duty, and the Honorable Minister looks forward to continued partnership with UN Women in implementing these new strategic notes between the period 2022-25. The achievements and successes are a result of efforts of all stakeholders working closely together and in partnership with UN Women. I therefore wish to express sincere appreciations to all stakeholders and partners, including MDAs, local governments, development partners, civil society organizations, academia, the culture and religious institutions, the private sector organizations, with whom the ministry works to promote gender equality and empowerment of women. The government of Uganda recognizes the need to expand opportunities for men and women, boys and girls, not only as a human right, but also as a means of sustainable, inclusive development. This commitment is reflected in the gender-responsive legal and policy environment that includes international instruments such as the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which Uganda ratified, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Sustainable Development Goal under the Global Agenda 2030, at the regional level, Uganda is a state party to the Maputo Protocol, to the Solomon Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, to the African Charter on Human Rights and the Rights of Women, to the Resolution 1325, and many others. The key legislative measures on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls are enshrined in the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which has guided the national agenda on women's human rights. Specifically, Article 32 of the Constitution of the affirmative action for the marginalized groups, Article 33 on the rights of women, and Article 180 in the local government for women representation. Other legal and planning frameworks that promote gender equality and empowerment of women are in the Uganda Vision 2040 and the National Development Plan 3, the Public Finance Management Act, which positions gender and equity at the center of the country's macroeconomic policy. The Uganda Gender Policy 2007, revised in 2017, and is still under review because we have to close all the gaps. The sectoral policies and programs for women and girls empowerment. Through these policies and legal frameworks, Uganda has registered significant progress in reducing gender inequalities and vulnerabilities through economic empowerment and social protection programs, like the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, the Youth Livelihood Program, the Labor Work Program, the Social Assistance Grant for the elderly persons, among others. These programs have expanded opportunities for social economic development for women, youth, persons with disabilities, and older persons. And I don't want to leave out the most important program now of late, the Parish Development Model, which is going to more than triple the amount of money we had for women entrepreneurship programs and projects. In reviewing progress under today's theme, we empower where we come from and where we're going. I'm pleased to highlight some of the achievements realized over the years. There is improvement in key socioeconomic indicators that include literacy rates for women, now at 72%, reduction in maternal mortality rate, which decreased from 438 to 336 deaths per live birth. 73% of births are now delivered in health facilities, an increase from 57% in 2011. Infant mortality rate at 41.958 deaths per 1,000 live births, which is at 3.21% decline from 2000. The National Resistance Movement, which came to power in 1986, opened a number of opportunities through affirmative action strategies that have enabled more women to participate in politics from grassroots level to parliament level. Participation of women in parliament has consistently been over the critical mass 30% since the 8th parliament in 2006 to 2011. In the recent parliament elections, 175 women were elected as members of parliament. Of these, 146 are district or city women representatives, 13 are representatives of special interest groups, and 16 are directly elected from the constituencies. This gives us a percentage of 34%, which is still above the critical mass. But we can't be proud that we are already there, because our journey only will end when we are at 50%. And so we are still moving. In addition, the first female speaker of parliament was elected in 2011, and she served a period of 10 years. And we elected another female speaker of parliament in the recent elections. The current vice president is a female, the prime minister. And this is not all, but I think it's important, and I think it attracts a big round hand of applause to the government of Uganda. because in a number of these positions, if it was not for the president, the head of state, to consider and empower women, to find them sensible and important enough to place them in these positions, would not certainly be celebrating this milestone achievement. The number of female cabinet ministers increased from 14, that was 19.4 in 2006, to 37 women ministers in 2021 parliament cabinet, which is almost half of the total cabinet. We now stand at 45%. The permanent secretaries now constitute about 48.5%. So once we have women placed in these high positions of responsibility, the rest of the journey is much simpler, because we speak a voice and to be received by one who has an appreciation for what we exactly have been struggling to achieve. So we are looking forward to getting just better, because at least the top is much clearer. In the local governments, women constitute 45.7% of the total elected leaders. And that is far above the recommended affirmative action of 30% critical mass. And among these 5 women district chairpersons, one from Kapchorwa, the other one is from Ramburi, another one from Shema, another one Butambara, and Kiriandongo district, and one mayor of Masaka. I think in the last 10 years, we only had one woman who had been consistent in the local government as a chairperson from Kanungu. But in the most recent elections, we're able to get at least 5. We are not yet there, I insist, but we are already moving. Government has increased investment in infrastructure to facilitate production, trade, including value addition, and access to services. These include construction and maintenance of appropriate community safe water supply system in rural areas at household and public institutional level, increased power generation, and expansion of electricity. The outcome is that access to grid electricity among households has increased from 14% in 2012-2013 to 24% in 2020. The target is to ensure that 60% of the population have access to electricity by 2025. Solar systems have now increased from 18% to 36% by 2020. And this was an initiative from the private sector and households. Presently, most of our children are in school. More girls than before are attending schools. Actually, last year, 2 years ago, we were able to hit 51% of enrollment. Girls in school had now surpassed the enrollment of boys, which was still standing at 49%. And I think that's also a very big plus to the women's empowerment and economic movement. For example, the girls' enrollment in primary school was 24.6% in 2001 and rose to 49.9%. Uganda has attained gender parity in primary education. Literacy rate of females have improved 70% and 71% from 2012 to 2020. Despite the considerable good progress made in promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, there are still challenges that we face. The deep-rooted perceptions and practices and negative mindset that undermine efforts to improve the status of women and girls. We are still living in a strong patriarchal culture and systems, and some of them even go into legislations, unfortunately. For example, if a woman is raped or girl is raped, anybody has sent for her, should be a police sergeant, it should be a medical officer, and at the level of a doctor. But how many doctors will leave their work to go to court to defend this girl or the woman who was raped? The affirmative action of 30% representation has seemingly become a law now. People seem to bundle women and put them, your share is 30%. If you attempted to contest for the open seat, many women, not only men, but even women would say, but we have already ours. As if that is all we should really settle for. So I was happy that the previous speaker talked about reviewing the coherence so that we can now move towards parity than concentrating on the critical mass. And I hate to feel or imagine that women are still referred to as a special interest group. Special interest, when you're 52% of the total population, it's so demeaning. We are partners. And if you're looking for development, you should raise women to the level of partners, not look at them as special interest groups. The disaster and emergencies such as floods, drought, COVID-19, climate change, and the continued influx of refugees has hit us back because we have to share the little resources we held. We would not have a problem with how hosting refugees. We proudly and accept to host them. But of course, we need more infrastructure services in areas where they are settled. Water, electricity, schools, we need to expand on those. Apparently, we are struggling to live together. Yes, because we enjoy our peace and we have the good heart of reception. But I think we need to improve in some of these areas. Unacceptability of high incidence of gender-based violence in communities. During the recent COVID-19, women and girls were commercialized, violence increased, and was not even attended to by duty bearers, specifically police. Whenever women would report, they would say this is a private matter, and you wonder what private is in somebody being beaten or battered or raped and is not being heard. Courts were closed, and so the little girls really suffered. The limited resource for gender equality and women empowerment interventions. All ministries all over the world, ministries of gender, are the least provided for with the budget. And if there is anything to do with the budget cut, they'll begin with that ministry because they consider it to be a consumer. And yet it is one which is the engine of empowerment for social development. It doesn't only stop there. I'm sure even the UN women of all the sectors, I'm sure it is the least funded on the list. It is a fact that we cannot speak in low tones. SDG 5, the social development goal 5, is the least funded. There is money for education, there is money for housing, there is money for infrastructure, roads and all that. But when it goes to equality, I don't know whether it is because of gender, the funding is completely cut. And I'm told, I think Madame Namondo stated it here, even coordination has no resources. So what do you coordinate when you have no resources? High level of poverty among women and greater share of unpaid care and domestic work. This is a matter that we need to discuss and not just discuss about it alone, but we need to engage more men to understand and appreciate that unemployment and unpaid care work, where women spend their 70% of the time. If we continue in that direction, we cannot reserve time for economic development. In outlining the strategies, the strategic direction of government, His Excellency, the President, has set out priorities for government's 5 years mandate, which are focused on social and economic transformation of communities to improve household incomes and alleviate poverty. These include the parish development model, a strategy that the government has instituted, organized, and deliver public and private sector interventions for wealth creation and employment generation at parish level as the lowest economic planning unit. This strategy will support 39% of the population to get out of subsistence farming and engage in production for markets, and therefore get involved in the money economy. Job creation for populations with specific focus on the youth. We are thinking about having around 18 industrial parks to ensure that we have many young people employed. Investment in infrastructure and communication with ICT, addressing the ongoing crisis of COVID-19 pandemic, including implementing the national COVID-19 response plan to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic on the communities in Uganda. Utilize community gatekeepers and community enablers, including religious and cultural leaders, to sensitize the women and other community members on peace building and non-violence approaches. Civil society organizations, like those in the women's movement, are those who have to target and work with very closely to deliver these goals. Embrace the male involvement strategy, reaching out male-headed institutions, namely religious and opinion cultural leaders, to demystify stereotypes, especially on balancing leadership and private roles. All line ministries, departments and agencies, private sector and civil societies to enable the implementation of the National Development Plan 3, as well as integrate it in their plans and programming. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I wish to appreciate the leadership of UN Women Uganda, Dr. Maxime Honto and Ms. Adekemi Ndieli, and the staff for the excellent support and collaboration. In actual fact, the ministry and the UN Women not only work as partners, but as a family. I also wish to thank all other partners that have worked tirelessly with the government of Uganda to achieve the milestone on gender equality and women empowerment that we are witnessing today. Our government is committed to deliver on its mandate of advancing the gender equality agenda and empowerment of women and girls, as well as working closely with other key stakeholders in this endeavor. And I want to thank you for listening to me, for God and my country.
A big applause to our minister. Thank you so much for the commitment towards gender equality and women empowerment in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going into the next session, and it will be handled by my colleague. She's one of the greatest gender champions that we have in the fraternity of media. She's Mildred Tuhaise, who works with NBS TV. And just to let you know that we are live on NTV, on NBS rather, TV. We are also live on our YouTube channel, UN Women globally. There are colleagues that are joining us from the different centers. And we also live on Zoom links. I also want to mention this as she comes, is that as part of the launch of this strategic note, we did commission a photo competition where we challenged the youth in this country to showcase of how they understand via photography in the element of gender equality and women empowerment, and we codenamed it We Empower. So as part of this launch, we'll be awarding the best exhibitor, the one that submitted a photograph or photographs that actually depicted what our theme was. And then outside from this hall, we also have an equality wall where we are asking you to tell us what you think of the future of gender equality in Uganda. So just in case as you move out, you'll see a wall and then you'll make your remarks on that wall. Thank you so much. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome Mildred to Haise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I am humbled to be here, and I think I can take off my mask as well. Very good morning to you all. Thank you for honoring the invite and for coming through, particularly speaking about, like you say, the subject I'm very passionate about, gender equality. We're all human beings. That is how I look at life, that we're all human beings and we deserve to be treated the same way. And like the minister said, gone are the days when women were looked at as special interest group, you know, marginalized group that then pushes you to the edge. But when you are brought on board as partners, then the discussion changes entirely. It changes from thinking for you to thinking with you. And that is why I love the work that the UN Women is doing, that they're bringing the women on board to the discussions, not to have them discussed for. And I don't want to take any more time. Like Dan introduced me, I am Mildred Tohaise. I work with Next Media Services and BSTV, and I'm glad to be hosting this high-level panel that is going to be joining us. And in just a bit, allow me in no particular order, invite our panelists. And of course, I'll start off with the Minister of Gender, Honorable Peace Mutuzo. Please take it up. Honorable Minister, and she actually just left, but we will definitely be having a representative. She talked about some of the efforts, or she's actually here, she will be joining us. Some of the efforts that have been taken by government. Yes, something has been done, but more needs to be done. And that is why in this strategic note, we're looking at what more can be done to advance the discussion about women empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, also allow me invite Ms. Sarah Hendricks, who is the Director of Program Policy and Intergovernment Division. A round of applause for her as she comes through. Thank you so much. Allow me invite a person who inspires me and a friend as well in this game, and that's none other than the UN Women Country Rep. That's Madam Adekemi Ndieli. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes through. She always keeps it African. I love that. The Ambassador of Norway, Ellen, her ambassador, please come through, Your Excellency. I am intentionally avoiding the second name because I do not want to murder the pronunciation of that particular name. I'll also have the Ambassador of Sweden, Her Excellency Maria Hawkinson. Please come and take your seat. A round of applause for her. And of course, at a later stage, we're going to have the Minister, Peace Mutuzo, who will be joining us in just a bit. This is going to be very, very brief, but straight to the point on the discussion that we are having. I love the pictures I saw outside. They were giving two sides of the coin. They were giving the gleam, the gloom and the glam still in the same context, but speaking to what more needs to be done. Seeing some of those pictures of women dealing in very hazardous, you know, situations is a call for protection, a call for how better their workspace can be done. But I will start off with Ambassador Maria. COVID-19, which the minister spoke to, is one of those seasons that has set us aback, but one of the seasons that has actually also made us realize that a lot more needs to be done. And it has particularly had a devastating effect on women and girls, not only in Uganda, but entirely across the world. And we, again, were tested actually with emerging challenges in the region. So, in your view, what does this mean for gender equality and women's empowerment? Because as Uganda Police, in the COVID-19 period alone, the reports in a month of gender-based violence were surpassing reports they could receive maybe on an annual basis in the past.
Thank you very much. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I mean, we know, of course, that the pandemic has had tremendous consequences on all aspects, and unfortunately also made gender equality work more difficult. But I think we also have to look upon it like that necessary reconstruction of our societies, economies is also an opportunity to change unfair systems and structures. And while recognizing that there are additional challenges brought about by the pandemic, And of course, we strongly support the continued unified UN response. And what we want to look at when the recovery phase that we now are in, that we use this to build back better and greener. And that the pandemic has accentuated the need for UN development and humanitarian partners to have access to flexible financing. So that's, I would say, it's difficult, but it's also an opportunity to do it better this time and to also address these norms. And it's also a way where we as Sweden would like to encourage our development partner friends to work more in the form of core funding and unearmarked funding, because we think that's the way to go. And we also very much welcome the ambition by UN Women to expand the partnerships with international financial institutions and investments also from the private sectors, because we are in a situation where development funding is not unlimited, and we have a very difficult situation in Europe close to our borders, which unfortunately have an impact of financing. So I think that's also a very important way to go ahead. But I think we have to look positively, use the challenges and as a transformation in working in a different way. Thank you.
Maybe that's where I would ask, how do we build back better? Because you talked about development funding, and like I said, COVID did not affect a continent or a country, but it was global, meaning everyone was affected, including the development partners. How can we get back on our feet?
Well, I think it's firstly, I think it's, I mean, we can all learn, like I said, when we now have to do economic recovery and change our policies, it's very important that we have a feminist and gender perspective from the start. And I think that's basic. And I think one, I mean, very pragmatic and something maybe overseen example sometimes, which I think Uganda's come a far way, it's like gender sensitive budgeting. You have to integrate gender from the beginning as we integrate other aspect like climate and so on. The other thing I think is flexible funding. And then the third is to expand the network to go beyond traditional development partners into international financial institutions, but also private sector. And I think so a broader network and a more flexible way of working.
All right, thank you very much. I will move on to Ambassador Ellen. Funding is extremely key, definitely. And I know that Norway has done quite a lot, investing globally, politically, financially, and in all aspects. And I know that you have helped Uganda, supporting Uganda to actually develop the third national action plan. The question here would be, for many people, like the minister said, the reason why the funding to issues of gender is a little bit low because it's mainly looked at as consumptive, right? So the question would be, why is this particular agenda so important to you? And what do you see next for Uganda in terms of progressing the same agenda?
Thank you very much, dear friends. I haven't spoken earlier today, so it's good to see you, friends in the UN Women, friends in UN, friends in government, friends in parliament, friends in the NGOs and the civil society. Just let me say that this is a special day for me because it's the Norwegian National Day. And back in 1814, we got our constitution, and we have had a good life with some breaks since then. So normally I will be in Norway, go to a beautiful cemetery close to my house, listen to the national anthem and honor the fallen during Second World War II, and then walk very closely to my friend's house where we are 10 women every 17th of May, meeting up, having breakfast, talking all day, and after a while also having champagne. So the most natural thing for me today, of course, was to be with the UN Women, because this is the closest I get to my friend. So, furthermore, I think I'm in a sort of Jens Stoltenberg moment, and I will explain. Jens Stoltenberg he was the Prime Minister in Norway. He's now head of NATO, a very tough job. And he was going into into an interview and the Norwegian television once, and just walking in with a journalist, the journalist said, "Oh, I forgot the questions. I don't know what to ask you." And Stoltenberg said, "You know, whatever you ask me, I'm going to give the same answer, so don't worry." So I got some questions beforehand, and now I got a completely different question from you. So I'm going to answer the question that I got, and that is about women's peace and security agenda, with a focus on that. So forgive me, but I think that is a very important issue for Norway and has been in a long time. So as you know, war and conflict affect men, boys, women, girls differently. Of course, boys and girls are kids and they should be protected. But in order to establish sustainable peace in the area of war and conflict, it's crucial, obviously, to include women. And our key speaker today, Claire, she was, I think she put her finger on an important issue, which has been mentioned by others as well. So we are called sometimes, not regularly, just by coincidence into something. And we even have shadow places where we are allowed to discuss. Yeah. That's a trap. And also, the minister said earlier that we are partners, we are not special cases. And I think I'm older than most of you here, and I've seen a lot from when I started my political career when I was 13 until now when I'm 67. So yes, it's a trap. Yeah. Don't go there. We are 50% or more, so we have to be part of everything and integrate it. And this is obviously a no-brainer, actually, but in the terms of peace and security, I mean, it's important to ensure that all angles of the situation is covered, because we see it differently. Important that no challenges are forgotten, that the full situation is fully understood, because if not, it could go very, very wrong. And that all interests are taken into account to ensure legitimacy and inclusiveness, ownership, all step in the peace, in the process to secure peace for men and women. Women need to be there in negotiations, in implementation. So for Norway, we are very committed to the UN Security Council adoption in 2000, the resolution 1325. And this resolution affirms the peace and security effort of more sustainable when women are equal partner in prevention of violent conflict and creation of lasting peace. And this has been a guiding star for Norway in all issues, also on the financing side. And we have a certain experience in trying to assist in creating peace and stability in Colombia in the negotiations with the FARC guerrilla, which was groundbreaking because it actually introduced the gender perspective in the negotiation. In the Geneva-based process on Syria, with the cooperation with UN Women and NOREF, in South Sudan, through the work in the Troika, through cooperation in regional organizations like OSSE and the African Union, in NATO, where we actually funded and provided a special representative for women on peace and security under the Secretary General, to mention a few. So for Uganda also taken a lot of leadership in this important area. And its first two action plans for women, peace and security focus very much on gender-based violence and protection. And for Uganda, unfortunately, and different from Norway, this was more a recent situation following the Lord Resistance Army conflict. This is a challenging issue in war and conflict. We see the image of men in the front and the women as victims, but still, we think that our experience with including women not only as victims but as actors is something that we can provide to assist Uganda in going forward. So in the third National Action Plan for Uganda, we should highly welcome more progress across the pillars, in particular in women's participation and women leadership. Uganda has a crucial role in the region as refugee hosting state, but also as contributor to regional peace process and peacemaking missions in the continent. In order to even be more successful, we believe Uganda would benefit from bringing more women into the process. One lesson from working with Ugandan authorities and international organizations here is the importance of the NAP to ensure women's participation in emerging issues, such as everything from climate change to having a greater responsibility for implementation on the district level. So, but still, I really like to congratulate Uganda for what has already been done, and we are here to assist and to help together with all the friends here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. A round of applause for her. We'll be getting back to the aspect. I love when you say we're actors, not just people who should be sidelined, and that will continuously stick in this discussion. Ms. Sarah Hendricks, coming from a global perspective, what do you think are the emerging challenges to gender equality and the women's empowerment globally? Because when you zero down to countries, each country has their own specifics, their own challenges and how to deal with them. But on a global perspective, what do you think are the challenges and how do you think they can be addressed?
Thank you so much. What a big question that is. And indeed, I think sits at the heart of the conversation that we're having today and the importance of the strategic note that's being launched today. When I look at the global perspective on gender, what's driving gender inequalities, I can't help but look at our present time and the ways in which COVID-19 has been what I call a big revealer, almost acting like a magnifying glass, helping us to put a focus on the inequalities, both the structural inequalities and others that have been there all the time, that were there all along, and have in many ways worsened the situation for women and girls around the world. One of the things that I think is important for us to recognize is the ways in which the current trends of these gender inequalities are preventing the world from being on track to achieving the SDGs. And in fact, UN Women has undertaken analysis of the current progress on the SDGs, particularly SDG 5, and has found that of the 18 gender equality targets, only one is really on track right now. And I wonder if you know which one that is. It is actually the one around the number of women, the proportion of women in local government. Other targets, including on violence against women, on care, on issues around discriminatory laws, all of these still are off track. And so these are, I think, providing for us an overall picture of the gender inequalities that we face around the world. And certainly COVID-19 has worsened this, as I've said. We've seen the negative fallout on women and girls, particularly as it relates to women and girls' economic and productive lives. We already know that women's labor force participation rates across the world have stagnated for the past 20 years. We've not seen labor force participation move beyond that 30% gender gap. And we've seen this worsen in the case of COVID-19, or in the context, I should say, as millions of women have left the workforce. We also see new projections which estimate that there are women and girls that are facing more extreme forms of poverty, and particularly for younger women and girls. In fact, the data point says that there are 24% more women in the age bracket of 25 to 35 years old who are now living in extreme forms of poverty than their male counterparts, due to the extenuating circumstances of COVID-19 and various global crises. And I think this points to the ways in which we look at what is happening around the world today, particularly from the lens of crises. We see a global crisis on care and care systems, the ways in which care impacts the ability for women and girls to take hold of economic opportunities. We also see the ways in which conflict and protracted crises have become more severe, creating conditions for increased forced migration, increased refugee flows. All of these trends are quite significant. We see demographic changes around the world, particularly notable here on the continent, where we've got a youth bulge that is both an opportunity for a demographic dividend, but also a critical challenge if not invested into effectively. And we also know that the geopolitical crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine is having significant impacts that are felt by women and girls right around the world, particularly as it relates to food security, but also to issues of protection, sexual and gender-based violence notwithstanding. It is so important for us collectively to ensure that the SDGs do not go off track, that we are across the UN system and in partnership with governments and civil society around the world, ensuring that in this context of crises, that we are advancing effectively towards the achievement of the SDGs. And that's part of the reason why UN Women has been, I think, very positional with our new global strategic plan. And our global strategic plan is situated in this context of these multiple and intersecting crises. It's situated within a context of pushback on gender equality, which is rearing its head in many contexts around the world, where we see the rise of illiberal democracies and the rise of gender inequalities and pushback on women's rights, very much framing the global discourse now more than ever before. And consequently, I think UN Women's new strategic plan, recently approved by our executive board, I think positions UN Women and the whole UN system to really drive forward changes in the areas that matter most to women and girls' lives. We have focused on 4 areas that will accelerate results to the SDGs. These are in the areas of governance and participation for women in public life, in ending violence against women, in driving forward results on women's economic empowerment, as well as in addressing the very issues that the ambassador from Norway highlighted on women, peace, security, humanitarian action, as well as disaster risk reduction and resilience. What we've learned at UN Women is how important it is not to undertake this work in silos, but to look at these issues in very integrated ways. And consequently, our new strategic plan has 7 cross-cutting systemic outcomes for the very first time in UN Women's history, really trying to pinpoint the underlying inequalities that undergird gender equality. And so in that regard, we have focused on critical areas of social norms, of financing for gender equality, of driving coordination across the UN system and partners, of advancing gender data and statistics, and of looking particularly at access to resources and voice and agency for women and girls notwithstanding. Our strategic plan articulates how UN Women will take hold of our triple mandate of working in terms of normative support on UN system coordination, but also in terms of our operational work on the ground. And we also have built this new strategic plan really in recognition of the compounding impacts of COVID-19 and really seeking to bring forward these integrated approaches to address those root causes of gender inequality. One of the distinguishing features of our global strategic plan is in fact on increasing financing for results and driving forward results at scale. And we know that that can only happen through catalyzing the efforts of all partners everywhere, both the UN system, government partners, multilateral partners, private sector partners, civil society organizations, especially youth-led organizations, especially women's rights organizations on the ground, and also importantly, men and boys. And that's why the engagement of men and boys is so critical to the delivery of this new strategy. This is part of our systemic outcome number 3 on social norms. This is a new outcome area for UN Women, but one that we're very committed to. And so we see this, and I'm sure you noted in the video that was played earlier, in terms of country offices elevating and deepening our work to drive forward positive masculinities, to work in a more systematic way in this regard, and to ensure that UN Women takes a leading role in incorporating the engagement of men and boys in our in cooperation frameworks in countries. I think one of the main instruments for our strategic plan are country strategic notes, and that's why I couldn't be more pleased to be here today to be part of the launch of Uganda's strategic note. It really reflects and embodies, I think, both the contextual realities that I've just highlighted, but also embodies and provides very concrete ways that UN Women in Uganda will deliver on the government's priorities, the cooperation framework across the UN system, through the elaboration of UN Women in Uganda's 6 targeted outcomes. And I'd love to just highlight before we go on to the next speaker, just how important UN Women, as well as the government of Uganda's role is in activating partners in something we call generation equality. Generation Equality is a platform that UN Women and other partners have tried to mobilize to bring multi-stakeholder partners together to really activate concrete results in service of the SDGs. And the government of Uganda made a phenomenal commitment that has stood out amongst other member states as being very transformative towards women's rights. This platform is very much something that is both intersectional, but also intergenerational, really amplifying the voices as well as the agency of youth. And we see the role of UN Women in Uganda as being so core to that. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. What is a comprehensive strategic plan that is, and I think Sarah mentioned one key issue, not working in silos, but working as a group, because there is a goal that we all aim to achieve. Let me come to you, Adikemi. Looking at our performance that has been done in a research by the UN, especially on goal number 5 on the SDGs, reminds me of back in school where you would find a note from the teacher, see me. So we all have to see the teacher. We all have to see UN on how better we can be able to perform on the SDGs. But having looked at all the challenges available, both globally and in the different states and nations and countries, how do we move forward? How do we address these challenges, but still be able to be on course for the gender equality drive?
Thank you, Mildred. This has been a huge challenge for us here in Uganda. And by the way, Uganda's program for UN Women is actually the largest in Africa and the 2nd largest in the world. So that shows us the commitment and the focus that we have and the commitment to bringing about a change to the issues that we see in the context of gender equality and empowerment of women. Our strategic note was developed within the context of COVID, which was very challenging, and we had a very auspicious opportunity also to review our work from the past 10 years, and also to look at the challenges of COVID and how we fit that together to come out with a more robust strategy that is more contemporary and addresses the issues that women face today. In that regard, we discovered, of course, that the progress on gender equality has been just too slow. And you heard that from other speakers, not just here in Uganda, but all across the world. And COVID-19 came in to reverse, very unfortunately, those trends, even the slowness that we saw, the progress that have been mentioned by the minister earlier on. COVID-19 came in and actually rolled back those results. And therefore, we had to think more creatively about how best to position ourselves within a very challenging environment with dwindling resources to gender equality, with shrinking space for civil society, and within the context that we find women and girls here in Uganda. And we came out with something that we call more integrated. We have a more integrated and a transformative approach for our work here in Uganda. Our programs and interventions would create the opportunities for individuals to actively challenge existing gender norms and promotes positions of social and political influence for women and girls in Uganda, and address power inequalities, dismantling existing patriarchy that continues to keep women and girls behind. So with this current strategic notes, you will not only see greater emphasis on integrated support for demand-driven, people-centered, and nationally owned development programs, but you would also see an elevated prominence in what we consider to be cross-cutting and systemic outcomes that are catalytic. Some of those have been mentioned by Sarah today. And apparently we developed our strategic note before the strategic plan came into existence. And when that was promulgated, we saw that there was a perfect match. That shows the progressive thinking of those who participated in the development process of our strategic note in country. And it shows how the issues in Uganda are also an exemplary of what is happening across the world and how we must actually demonstrate the results here on the ground in Uganda. So some of the systemic issues that we're looking at include some of those that I've mentioned by Sarah, including normative coordination, gender data, which is really, really core to our work because that enables us to identify those meaningful areas where we want to invest significantly and ensure that we can bring about a change. One major part of our work, and I think Uganda is one of the first countries, if not the first, to have a strong approach towards our leaving no one behind principle, which is a programming principle for the United Nations. But we have invested significantly in that area, and that links us to our work on data, of course, to address all multiple forms of discrimination and marginalization that women and girls continue to face. The youth is also very central to our work, and that's why the program was started off by a young voice speaking out, and we take the pride in the fact that we are able to empower adolescent girls and young women to participate in decision-making and also to speak out. Another area is the area of innovation. If we do not innovate, then we would be like the person who's doing the same thing and expecting different results. So innovation is critical to our strategic note, as well as engaging men and boys, as was earlier mentioned. We have examined UN Women's convening role and our ability to bring partners together. And we want to see a more collective and flexible approach to funding for gender equality, not just for UN Women, but for women's rights organizations who are there in the communities doing the work even before development partners come into the picture. We would like to use our unique convening role to support multiple partner advocacy strategies, platforms, and dialogues between government, civil society. We know that we have that unique role in bringing together partners across board to speak and address these issues and use them as a voice to change, to bring about change. In line with our aspirations as UN Women, and we have also aligned ourselves with the strategic plan. And one good thing about our strategic note is that it is fully aligned to the UN cooperation framework. Excuse me. So we are coming up with ways in which we can better work and change external contexts and evolve strategies that meet the expectations of women and girls. This will enable us to respond with greater agility and dexterity to the emerging context, particularly when we see the unprecedented challenges that we faced during COVID. We are developing our organizational and effectiveness strategy to be better accountable to our donors and also to the resources that we receive, and to accelerate business transformation for financial sustainability. This is enabling us to expand our work to different parts of the country and also to scale up our efforts in a way that we haven't done in the past. Because funding for gender equality is so critical, even though that is dwindling. So we're coming up with innovative ways in which we can mobilize resources, not only from our traditional donors, and we do really appreciate the fact that our traditional donors are seated with us across the table, but also looking for ways in which we can scale up our resources with the private sector, high net worth individuals, and other avenues through which we can mobilize resources, and so that we're thinking outside the box and able to mobilize effective resources for our work. My ask from partners today is to commit to more collective and targeted actions for gender equality in Uganda that favors flexible, core, predictable, and sustainable funding to give UN Women and women's rights organizations the opportunity to respond more effectively to issues that are happening across Uganda. And an example of that was the crisis that we're experiencing in Kisoro. UN Women was one of the few agencies that was quick to put boots on the ground, and that is as a result of the flexible funding that we continue to receive from Sweden, and this is very important. So as a result of that, we have responded to that crisis, and we hope that we can continue to scale up our work in that direction. So it will take a shift in mindsets, and we want to call on our partners across the table to think more creatively about how this can be done. But we believe that we all, collectively, all the women and girls of Uganda, the important duty to move in that direction. And if we want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go farther, you go together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for Adekami. I know our time is far spent, but I will give each one of us just a minute. I want to start with you, Ambassador Ellen, especially on the aspect of women, peace, and security agenda. Looking at it on a global perspective, there are just a few women in the places of power, strategic places to make decisions. And I'm looking at this in the realm of politics across the world. How better, because politics is very key with regard to issues of peace and security. It could either go sour or make it better. How do we encourage more and more women? How can we best place the issue of gender equality in that discussion, the political discussion?
Thank you very much. And actually, my last meeting with His Excellency the President, he was characterizing me as revolutionary. I was wondering, is that a compliment or what is it? I didn't ask. But my point to this one is, we women, we will not be given equal treatment. It's a fight. And I guess that's where the revolutionary come. You have to, I used to say that, I mean, in the family, the main point is to get out of the house first, because if you are last, you have to take the children to the kindergarten. It's not that my husband is nice and that's why I can do what I want to do. And it's also not that men are the enemy. It's about working together, but to empower us or young women today in Uganda, everywhere. And for me, it was extremely important that we had a female prime minister in Norway in the 1980s. She is a kind of tiny lady. She's still around, really stout. And she just decided that in any government I will have, it has to be 40% women, period. And this was in 1980 something. And she's the only statesman Norway has had. And nobody, no prime minister in Norway still dares to have a government, disregard of party or political affiliation, without actually having 40%. And that was the start. You have to, I think you have to force your way into sort of equal distribution of power. It's not given. You have to fight, and you have to bring as many men as you can along in this fight, because it actually makes sense. We are for 50%, and you lose the brain capacity of 50% of your population if you don't lose it. But again, it's a fight. So we have to organize, you have to organize yourself, we have to organize our community in order to tap into all these resources. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope the women heard that. It's a fight. It's not going to be given to us. We have to fight, but we also recognize the contribution of the men, because we cannot do this just alone. Ambassador Maria, and I think this will also go to Ms. Sarah. We talked about COVID-19, took the world by surprise, and like maybe SARS and Ebola and HIV, which hit particular areas across the world, this was global. No one was left behind. Are we prepared enough? Have we learned lessons to be able to take up such an occurrence in the near future?
Well, I don't think anyone, I mean, this whole pandemic, it's sort of like a bad science fiction movie in a way. I don't think anyone thought we were so unprepared. So I don't know how to answer to that question. I guess we have learned some lessons in that. And I'm not sure I can give a much more intelligent answer to that, but obviously it has, I think it has put a lot of issues on the agenda, which is beyond the pure health dimension of the crisis. I mean, gender equality and its adverse effects on girls are one, but also the need for multilateralism in a way, and how interdependent we are on each other. And if anyone didn't know that before, I think this served as a very strong reminder. And I think it's the right time to underline that as we sit here in one of the UN agencies event, that I think UN and the global institutions are key to all of us, and we all need to work together, and of course obviously also in the reform process of this, but that we are linked in that way. And that goes for gender equality, of course, as well. And then I also just want to support what was just said here by Ellen, that obviously when we look at Sweden today and Norway and we see where we are, it's not been given, and it's definitely not always been the case, and it's incremental, and it takes work. And there's still work to be done, of course, maybe on a different level and with certainly some different issues. But it has taken hard work by many women and fortunately some men to get us where we are. And hopefully that can also inspire. And as in other areas of life, hopefully we can here in Uganda avoid some and sort of leapfrog in other aspects, and you have a very impressive representation here politically, but that's important, obviously not enough. But I think what Ellen said, it should not be underestimated, because the source of inspiration and to show that women are there and women are as important in decision making as men. I think having female speaker, prime minister, vice president, it goes a long way. So let's work on that and get the results we want.
Thank you very much. Sarah, the same. Are we learning lessons? Because like Ambassador Maria said, when COVID came, we looked at it as just health, you know?
Yeah.
We never looked at the socio-economic, people losing lives, rape, gender-based violence. Are we learning enough lessons for the future?
You know, I think this is probably one of the most important questions around the world we need to be asking, because I believe that we're probably a heartbeat away from the next crisis, the next pandemic, as scary as that may sound. What are we learning? One of the things that UN Women did together with UNDP was undertake what we called a gender policy response tracker. We looked at 5,000 plus policy responses from more than 200 governments and territories right around the world to look at both their fiscal stimulus packages, their policy responses on the vulnerability of women and girls to increased violence, a range of different policies, and we tracked them through this whole period of COVID-19. This is all online. It's pretty phenomenal. You can see any government and actually look at what kind of policies were put into place to respond to COVID-19. And what we saw very soberingly is that even as there was such a strong policy response, it was inevitably ineffective in focusing on critical gendered realities of the pandemic. And I'll share a data point for that. Of the 500 different measures taken by more than 219 countries and territories, only 13% looked at women's economic security. Only 13%. In a world where women were disproportionately leaving the workforce in droves, and less than 7% addressed care, in a situation where it was unpaid care work that was hampering women of all backgrounds from being economic actors. So I think we've learned how important it is to place a gender lens on whatever pandemic response we have. We also saw that in all of the different national COVID-19 mechanisms, in some cases, these were committees. In other cases, these were specific mechanisms. Less than 24% included women, or had gender parity is what I should say. And so we've also seen the ways in which women need to be at the table in terms of planning for responses to pandemics.
Thank you. Thanks. You're either at the table or you're part of the menu, like I always love to say. Adekemi, just 1 minute. You talked about, you will answer to that, but you also talked about a very key issue of individually addressing the barriers of, the cultural barriers, the patriarchy. That becomes a very tight rod to tread, How best can that be done? That the cultural norms are held, but gender equality is at the center stage.
I think the starting point is research, very clearly gender data that reflects those differentials, and then working very closely with traditional rulers as well as religious leaders, and giving women the opportunity to speak up about these challenges, and then working at the community level to ensure we can bring about a mindset change. Fortunately, the government is focused on one of its integrated programs on community mobilization and mindset change. And hopefully we would see a very significant investment in that area. Just on Friday, I was at the Kabaka's Palace and they had the women's convention. And we called on him to use his influence to advance gender equality and the empowerment of women. We need more men in positions of authority speaking up about these things and challenging existing patriarchy and social norms so that we can bring about a change. But it's not just only women that should be doing this. We need to work very closely with men and boys as partners to ensure that this is a reality. Thank you.
A round of applause for our distinguished panel. I think key aspects that are coming through, but because of time, we need to close this off. I will officially flag you off, my distinguished panel. Another round of applause as they get to leave. It's only unfortunate we couldn't have the minister. She's not feeling well and also has a very close family member who she had to attend to in hospital, and that is why she couldn't stay with us any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, I will request that we take on the official launch of this strategic note before we get to know who our winner of the photo, competition is. And allow me invite Adikemi back here, as well as, the country rep UN Women, and the deputy rep will as well be joining us as we get to officially launch this. And we will also invite the assistant DPP to please come through. All the ambassadors, I do request that we step to the fore as we get to officially launch this strategic note. I will invite LT to come and join us as well. The resident coordinator, please kindly come and join us here as we officially get to launch this strategic note. I will request as well all the ambassadors to come back and step forward. This is a key, a strategic note that is looking at several areas, 7 key strategic areas that will be paid attention to between 2022 and 2025. We will start with the resident rep who will sign on this strategic note. And in case there is anything that we're going to be saying, the mic is just here ready for us. Let's all get back and have the AFL rep, Dr. Corridor is here with us as well. And officially, when the resident rep gets to append the signature to that, we would have officially launched this. This is not like a birthday where we're going to sing happy birthday or something like that. But we want to say congratulations to UN Women and the entire UN fraternity for ensuring that this comes to pass. And I will request the resident rep to go ahead and append her signature, and we will have all the rest of us append the, woo, very brief and precise, a round of applause. This is officially launched. I'll have Madame Adikemi append her signature, Dr. Corridor, and the ambassadors as well. Go ahead and look at that. And as they append their signatures, the 7 key strategic areas that this strategic note is going to be looking at include inclusive and accountable governance and women's access to justice. In there is women's rights, gender responsive peace and security. And there is also women having increased productivity, income, and access to resources. And as the government looks at the parish development model, that has to be something that is paid attention to. The key strategic note is also looking at vulnerable women having the capacity to mitigate and adapt to climate change and disaster reductions. We also have women and girls enjoying quality basic social and protection services. And above all, the strategic note is also looking at gender equality and women's rights fulfilled in a culturally responsive environment. That is what Adikemi was speaking to earlier on and talking about having to evolve the cultural leaders, the community, and the religious leaders. I am loving the signatures here, very brief and precise. Many of them will have the very, all right, we are done with this. We'll have a photo moment. We could just get a little bit close to the strategic note and we will officially launch this. Another round of applause. This is going to be very instrumental in championing gender equality in Uganda. And we already know our space with regard to just how broad this is, the discussion, not only in Africa, but across the world. All right, I think the paparazzis, we're done with this. Another round of applause as our guests get back. Very key to have this launched, and I hope that we all can be able to take a chance to look at it. Now, there was a photo competition, and it was very important to highlight the creativity and talent of Ugandan youth while they're exploring the future of women's empowerment. And of course, in collaboration with KQ Hub Africa, UN Women put out a call, which invited people to participate. And the photos that you did see outside there did exhibit the different photo scenes exploring the future of women's empowerment under different themes, including women in leadership, women in economy and climate, as well as women overcoming barriers. And of course, we have a winner. But the photos that were exhibited there are by distinguished finalists. And I will request all our finalists to just stand up for recognition. I will not mention names, but all our finalists who participated in this competition, please, yeah, those other people put up those beautiful images that by a mere look at the image, you can be able to tell the story that is behind that particular image. And now we will invite our winner. And it's not just about winning and taking the picture and being recognized. The winner of this competition will join UN Women Communications team for 2 months to be able to work with the Kampala office and in the offices around Uganda. I think that is a very big opportunity. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause right there. And I will request Adikemi once again to come back, and Dan Bazira, who is the deputy country rep, to come through. And ladies and gentlemen, our winner for the competition is none other than Ali Maka. Ali Maka, congratulations. Ali Maka, please come through. Big round of applause. A lot of excitement that is coming through there. And of course, that is the picture right there. In just a minute, you will be paying attention to. And she was looking at the category of women breaking barriers. Like it was said earlier on, it's a fight. This is going to be a fight. It is not going to just come in and be given. Ali Maka will have the opportunity for 2 full months to work with the UN Women Communications team and all the other officers around. Wow. All right, let's get Ali to just speak to us for just a minute. What inspired you, this particular picture? Was it by coincidence or did you plan to actually take this particular one?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maka Ali. This photo, we're in a Jumani district, and I was working with Scorpion and leadership organization called Scorpion, and she was the guest speaker. So she was 30 minutes late, and to our surprise, she came riding a motorcycle. So everybody turned, everybody was astounded. But yes, I asked if I should take a picture, and she said yes. She was happy. She's a happy woman. So yes, that's what inspired the picture. And thank you very much for this opportunity, you and me.
A big round of applause for Ali Maka. And UN Women, thank you so much for that. We Empower Photography Contest. Pictures speak thousands of words. You don't need to explain. That picture alone can be able to let us know what exactly was going on in the mind of Ali as she was taking the picture, but also going on in the mind of the lady as the picture was being taken. So ladies and gentlemen, trying to catch up on time as well, we will have another panel, and this is particularly going to be a technical panel, and you will allow me invite the technical panelists looking at this launch of the strategic note. And still in no particular order, I will invite Evelyn Letio, who is a program specialist and leads the team on ending violence against women team in Uganda country office. A round of applause for Evelyn Letio as she comes forward. Also part of this, Evelyn, you will just take your seat at the front. Also part of this team will be Claire Hawkins. Claire is a women peace and security specialist with over 10 years experience in Ireland, Geneva, New York, Kenya, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, as well as Ugandan. She's currently the Women, Peace, Security, and Humanitarian Action Team Lead with the UN Women here in Uganda. We'll give a round of applause for Claire Hawkins, who will be joining us in just a bit. Also part of this technical team, ladies and gentlemen, is Paul Collins Okello. Like we said, it cannot be a discussion of only women led by women about women, but the men also need to be a part of this. Paul Collins Okello, a round of applause for him, is responsible for the formulation, management, and implementation of programs under the Women Economic Empowerment. And as well, we will have Grace Belenzi Gulere. Let's give a round of applause for Grace as she comes through. Grace is a program specialist for gender statistics and also the team lead for the governance pillar. Let's welcome Grace, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Grace, if you could just sit right next to Paul. All right, we will be able to fully constitute a team as the rest of the panelists do come through. I will take, Evelyn is here with us, not yet. Oh, right there. You're not wearing a mask, definitely. Evelyn, I will definitely start off with you. And UN Women has definitely been active in the field of violence against women for some time. And we have seen some wins and some challenges as well. That's what it is always, the two sides to the coin. What is changing in the new strategic note that we've just seen launched here, and how are we learning from the work to date, where we are? Whichever you choose to.
On?
Yes.
Is it on now? Uh-huh. I'm not used to these things, so you will pardon me. I come from a village. So thank you very much, Mildred. That's a very pregnant question, so many subsections in it. But you certainly are right. There have been some gains, and we have been in this field of violence against women for a while. Very many things come to my mind. But I think for me, one of the things we can boldly say is that violence against women is no longer whispered about in little bedrooms. It's no longer just an issue for a few women's rights organizations out there. It has made itself an agenda on the public health arena in terms of development and a human rights issue. It is discussed, at barazas, in communities. It is on an objective on the agenda of many organizations, an agenda of government. It is a place that has now seen increased investment, even from development partners. In the last 5 or so years, although we're still saying we need more money, we see that there's been more money that is coming to interventions around violence against women. Of course, we've seen laws and policies that have come in place. We also have seen strengthened capacity across, prevention and response, including the JLO sector that UN Women works very closely with. So yes, we have come a long way. Okay. But are we there? The answer is no. We recently had a violence against women survey for the first time to complement the Uganda demographic health survey. And it showed us that violence is still at about 36%. Previous speakers have spoken about the increment that we saw during COVID. And the rapid assessment survey that was done by the Ministry of Gender and UBOS also indicates that violence during COVID was around 36%. And teenage pregnancy, I'm not going to repeat what people have said. So we still do have violence at numbers and statistics and stories that's still overwhelming. So while there are gains, as you said, there's still places that we need to go to. Okay. Your question to me was, what is changing in this new strategic note? And what have we learned? For a very long time, and it still seems to be the trend, we have focused on intimate partner violence, domestic violence, because it is the most prevalent kind of violence that we see globally, but also in Uganda. Okay. But when you look at the data we are seeing, it's telling us that violence is changing faces. The new types of violence that also require our attention. Mm-hmm. We, for example, are seeing violence in terms of sexual harassment in schools, in universities, we are seeing cyber harassment being reported on at very, very worrying rates. The streets in everywhere, particularly in Kampala, are not safe. Women in the markets, in the informal sector, so in the new strategic note, while we will continue to talk about domestic violence and try to make homes safe for women, we also want to shed light on these other types of violence and say, it requires more investment, more attention, more innovation to be able to change that. You asked, what are we going to do differently? Previous speakers, including our Director for Partnership, talked about new areas of investment for UN Women, like social norms. And in Uganda, we will be scaling up our work around social norms, because before we understand and question violence, we will be unable to generate the demand for services. We will be unable to even demand for resource investment to increase for violence against women. So there will be certainly more investment in the arenas around social norms. But talking about social norms, I think we now know the why. For the last 5 years, we've been drumming in why it is important to invest on violence against women. I think in this new strategic note, we want to go a notch higher and say, what does it take to end violence against women? How? The how of ending violence against women is going to be a focus for us. And all these things around working with men, around addressing intersectionalities and vulnerabilities, around working with cultural leaders, not to just make pronouncements, but to actually change the values, the practices, and align them to international human rights standards. A number of things that we will be doing moving forward. Of course, we've learned a lot. I don't know if we have a lot of time to talk about what we have learned, but certainly when we have longer term funding, which we have been able to enjoy in the last 5 years, thanks to partners like Sweden, EU, Austria, we can do work in a systematic, integrated, holistic way. And when you do work that's around gender equality in a way that really is meaningful, then you're able to see results. Okay. And we really hope that we are able, moving forward, to foster partnerships that can allow us to do work based on the theory in the field on what works to end violence against women.
Thank you very much. I think it's great that the keynote is actually looking at the new forms of harassment, cyber harassment. We all have phones right here, but we normally see what goes on right there as the women are harassed, unfortunately, sometimes by fellow women. Paul, looking at issues of economics, NDP3 is here, and we know we're currently even looking at the budgeting cycle. We've continuously seen the statistics that even the president speaks about. More than 70% of Ugandans actually who are in the agricultural sector, and agro-industrialization being very key to the government's strategic objectives. One would ask, how is UN Women going to partner to ensure that and contribute to this particular aspiration in the next 4 years?
Thank you so much, Mildred. I think that's really a very important question. And it is a question, $1 million question, I can say. Why? What is the importance of agriculture in our economy? Let me start with a story. Just last week, I asked my boss, Kemi, for me to leave the office space and go to West Nile.
To the farm.
I was in Adjumani, Obongi, Moyo, Yumbe, then I exited through Arua. Okay. Quite interesting. My interest was to go and speak to young women, particularly teenage mothers. There are those who have babies as young as 14. So I was discussing with them, what do you do for a living? Over 95% affirmed they are doing agriculture for their survival, subsistence agriculture for their survival. And I was speaking to these young ladies, both from the refugee community and the host community. Of course, as I was exiting and seated around Arua now taking coffee, a lot of things was coming into my mind. If we are to change the well-being of girls and women in this country, what can we do? We need to get the priority right. We need to get the priority right. How? We need to look at the productivity of young women and girls in the agricultural sector. It is quite intriguing that at the moment, the cost of gender gap in agricultural productivity stands at almost 0.42. This is quite huge. If you are to turn around that and increase the productivity of girls and women in the agricultural sector as a backbone of our economy, then we'll be having almost $67 million in annual income, which will change the landscape, change the well-being of the women. So the issue is, what is UN Women doing? I mean, this is not only the UN Women issue, it is our issue. All stakeholders seated here and those out there. These women I was talking to, I'm sure they'll not have an opportunity to come and sit where we are now and deliberate on issues that affect them without us listening to them. So how do we increase their productivity? How do we increase their income? I think the focus is to invest more to close the gender gap in the agricultural sector. And this has to be deliberate. At the moment, of course, as UN Women, that is our focus. Look at the value chain in the agricultural sector and engage women as much as possible and bring them on board to be partners. Not a woman getting early in the morning with a kid on the back to go and use a hoe to dig to survive. This won't change the country. It won't change the economy. It was so intriguing that even these women who are going to their garden every day, they are restricted by their own husbands not to leave the home to go and do other livelihood activities, including engaging in small trade. These are some of the barriers that women face every day that we need to be open and talk about it and address it. The same woman is going to use 3 hours to sell her labor to get 3,000 shillings. That is almost $0.7. This is 3,000 shillings. These are the people I was interacting with. How do we change the productivity of this woman to ensure that they have better technologies to engage in agriculture? They have better innovative ways to ensure that they can be able to plow enough land. Okay. They can be able to own the land. Most of them were not actually even owning the land they are talking about. Some of those were widows whose husband had died, and they were renting land from other people in the community because their own land has been taken off. Okay. So if we are to change the life of women as UN Women, we want to focus in that direction and work with all actors in order to change the lives of women to be more productive, close the gender gap in the productivity, and then improve the value chain, and then into the market, and then income will come in, and the life of the women will be okay. We cannot do this without money. Actually, based on the theme of the launch today, we need to empower women by investing more in their productivity. That is what I can say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Paul. And I think you mentioned a very key component while you were doing your interviews, and I'll take it from there to Claire, the aspect of the refugees, and looking at Uganda's response globally to welcoming in refugees. Claire is joining us online, and Claire, I would like to speak to you with regard to the UN Women's work in interfacing with the humanitarian development nexus, because every time one mentioned refugees, aspect of food security comes in, because you need to look at food as a basic commodity that needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you very much, Mildred. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, Claire, we can.
Great. Okay, so I think in order to really speak to the nexus, you explained it, the humanitarian development nexus, we have to add the peace angle. And so allow me first to talk about what UN Women has prioritized for this area around women, peace and security and humanitarian action that looks at this nexus and what we're doing for the next 4 years. And really to start, I think we need to first look at the vision for what we want to achieve in this outcome. And it's really simple. For UN Women, we want to see women participating and benefiting from peace building and recovery, including in situations of displacement and refugee influxes. And we will do this through weaving integrated outcomes towards this area across our strategic note for the next 4 years. But really the question is why? Why are we doing this? And it's because we know through decades of experience that violent conflict is recognized as one of the main barriers to achieving the SDGs. In Uganda, there's no region that hasn't experienced some form of violent conflict over the last 30 years. Even today, we can still see this happening, whether it's land or natural resource related conflict, inter-ethnic or religious conflict, violent extremism. We've seen the attacks, by election related violence that we saw last year. And we've seen also in the past couple of years that natural disasters and epidemics and pandemics with COVID have really amplified underlying conflict triggers. With the refugees in Uganda, we see over 1.5 million refugees spread across, especially the West Nile region of Uganda and the Southwest. And mostly these are women and children that have faced significant sexual violence from where they've come from. And in Uganda, we still see conflict between refugees and host communities. So women are the most affected by these peace and security issues, but yet, despite all this, women remain underrepresented in key mechanisms, structures and processes for advancing peace and security, for looking at disaster risk reduction, and in humanitarian responses as well, such as the refugee response. So how does this work? How does this approach that UN Women has work? Well, we've learned that the best way to build peace and prevent any future conflict is through inclusion. And UN Women takes this on by ensuring that women and girls really contribute to and have greater influence in building sustainable peace and resilience and benefit equally from conflict and disaster prevention and from humanitarian action. But addressing gender inequality across this nexus of humanitarian development and peace really requires us to do things differently. So really then it brings the question, what are we doing differently? Well, I can name 2 things that we're doing differently in this strategic note that we have for the next 4 years. One is the multi-layered, holistic approach that we take to addressing the needs and concerns of a woman. We do this in 3 ways. One is through systems, structures, and environment to support a woman in her journey to recovery and resilience by providing tools and skills and gender expertise for humanitarian actors to mainstream gender in refugee and humanitarian responses, but also addressing those deep-rooted cultural and social norms and behaviors, and critically working with men as actors for change through our male engaged programs. And the second layer is by ensuring the woman is protected and has the access to all the services that she needs to rebuild her life here in Uganda, whether this is through psychosocial support, access to justice. And then finally, we promote positive coping mechanisms and sustainable economic activities And we do this through ensuring there's access to education for girls to go back into school, to access vocational skills, access to innovative finance solutions and training in business and the value addition processes that you can go through, and also cash for work. And then a second approach that we have is our partnerships, which are really critical, whether it's our partnerships with government, such as the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. We have a very strong partnership with OPM, the Ministry of Defence, police. But we also work with dozens of women's rights organisations at a grassroots level. And our approach through these partnerships is for women, by women, to ensure effective and sustainable impact that lasts and lasts long. So then allow me to kind of begin to wrap up by kind of sharing some good news stories about the successes that we've managed to achieve in this area over the past 4 to 5 years. And firstly, we always hear about the policies and plans that are being developed, but in Uganda, these commitments, especially in the area of women, peace and security, are being implemented, not only at a national level, but at a local level in many critical locations and institutions. And this has been achieved by the incredible investment we've seen by our fantastic donors like Norway, Sweden, Japan, the EU, Austria, and many others, but also the commitment by government by placing it as a priority in their budgeting processes. And then the second great success that we've seen is the increase in representation of women refugees, especially in leadership positions. We've seen a huge increase over the past 5 years, from 10% in 2017 women refugee leaders to now today in the most recent elections in Adjumani, we saw it increasing to 53%. And we're seeing that in these communities where there are more women leading, we've seen an increased awareness in the really pertinent issues women are facing, such as girl-child education, such as teenage pregnancy, but also a reduction in violent conflict in these areas, and a reduction in cases of SGBV. So we see this is really working. And then our final and critical success that we've seen that we're really looking to scale up is our increased engagement of men and boys, cultural and religious leaders as well, in advocating for women's participation and leadership and addressing those difficult social norms. And we've seen these male champions now really shaping the perspectives and perceptions of young people on gender equality. And we've seen religious and cultural leaders stepping up and now addressing issues of gender and women's rights and empowerment. So the great thing about all of these interventions is that we've really proposed in this new SN that these innovations that we've tried and tested are now ready for scale to achieve a greater impact. And we're very confident about the impact we're going to achieve over these 5 years because we've already seen it happen. So now it's really a chance to take this up to scale. So back over to you, Mildred. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Claire. A round of applause for her. She mentioned very critical areas, but she mentioned an area that leads me straight to the question for Grace. She mentioned the issue of representation of women, and that now brings in the UN Women's work in governance, because issues like political participation, issues of gender financing, the minister was earlier speaking about, if the government is looking at any ministry to cut money from, they will start with the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. So how, and yet these are critical pillars to realization of the UN Women's footprint and for the impact. So how do these actually get to interface with the different outcome areas to see a lasting change for the women and girls in Uganda? Could just have the mic tilt it a little closer to you. Yes.
Thank you, Mildred. In the strategic note at UN Women is focusing on inclusive and accountable governance and women's access to justice. This will involve addressing issues of gender equality in terms of positioning, strategic positioning of women and girls in leadership, not only in political leadership, but also in the corporate leadership, in the civil service, and also in the communities down in the cultural arenas, and also in the religious space, because all these areas, all these arenas, women and girls play as well as men. So in terms of addressing this positioning, we have to enhance the capacity of women and girls to have voice, but also to have the capacity to participate effectively in political leadership, that is in the elections. For example, now we are looking forward to the local council elections. We have to equip the women, empower them to speak in public, to make a case as to why they should be representing the communities and bringing the issues that affect women and girls on board. And this can only be addressed if women are strategically positioned in leadership in the different arenas. Also, positioning women will be facilitated by enhancing capacity of government institutions, the civil society, but also including the private sector in terms of equipping them with skills and capacity to integrate gender and equity in planning, in budgeting, in resource allocation, but also going down into looking at how the beneficiaries, who are the communities, the vulnerable population, actually benefit from the resources allocated through the services that will be delivered through an enabling structure. And this UN Women has ensured through positioning of gender and equity in the strategic planning process, not only for the strategic note of UN Women in all the program areas of UN Women, but also in the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. We have also supported government in integrating the gender and equity issues in the National Development Plan 3, and also the Plan for National Statistical Development to be able to generate the requisite statistics and data to build evidence to show how the resources are trickling down to the identified and targeted beneficiaries without leaving anyone behind, especially the women and men, the women and girls, but also including the men and the people with disability not being left out, and all the other vulnerable groups, including the refugees, even if Uganda is one of the countries that is having the largest refugee influx.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Grace, I know the TV time is not elastic, so we'll be saying bye to our viewers on TV, but just extend 10 minutes right here with the panel and get to conclude this, because this is the very final aspect of our discussion. But I would like to come back to you, Evelyn, on the issue of economics, which I will also want Paul. I mean violence, I beg your pardon. On the issue of violence, you were talking about some of the lessons that have been taken. And like we said earlier on, that when some of the issues come through like COVID-19, we tend to look at the straightforward, which was health. We didn't look at the other part. Have we learned enough lessons to be able to deal with, to address issues of gender equality across board, starting from the family level up to the leadership level?
Thank you very much. Yes, we have learned a lot of lessons. One of them for us is that some of the gains that we had made were quickly reversed, and we've learned how fragile the work around gender equality broadly, but violence against women can be.
Okay.
And so I think it leaves us with critical questions around how we do our disaster preparedness, our humanitarian response. If you look at the terrain for Uganda, for example, being a development country, a lot of our interventions, including violence against women, have not necessarily factored into the humanitarian action. And so when we started seeing the refugees, we did go in to do quick response. We hear Kisoro, we go. We hear Ajumani, we go. But I think what we learned from COVID is beyond the conflicts. And we also need to think about humanitarian crisis more broadly, and contingency planning and emergency preparedness. But I think like previous speakers also said, we didn't see the magnitude of COVID. So limiting our lessons to COVID may not give us the broad spectrum to look at some of the lessons. But one of the things that I think I wanted to flag for me in terms of lessons learned is around our work on access to justice. That's one of the critical areas of our intervention as UN Women. And this is based on an integrated program approach where we believe that for you to end violence against women, you need to have a prevention component on why does violence happen. But as women speak out and as girls experience violence, you need to have services that are compassionate, that are of quality, that are timely for people to access. And then as all this is happening, you need to be also able to have in place women's rights organization, girls, groups that are demanding for an end to impunity. They are referring people to these services, but they are also holding people accountable for not providing these services. What have we learned on our work around access to justice? We adopted what we called a system-wide approach in strengthening access to justice, and say we need to be able to work across the sector from entry to exit, so that wherever a survivor goes, they are interfacing with the service provider that knows what they're doing, that is empathetic enough, and that can collect the data in a confidential way, and that also knows that they are not the only service point, and they are going to be able to refer people to the different points. We also have realized that beyond training on knowledge, the attitudes of service providers are critical. Because if you walk to me and I don't believe that a slap is serious, then I am not going to take your case serious. But what will this result into? Because violence is very complex. It's a slap today, it's a strangle tomorrow, it's a panga the next day, it's a bullet the next day. How do we work with service providers so that their attitudes and their knowledge shift, so that their practice on how they do these things shift? But that said, we also have realized that beyond talk, there needs to be investment in the logistics that makes people do this work. When you give computers to a police, when you give cameras to police, when you work with the DPP's office and equip and have child-friendly places where they can be able to support young girls in a place that's not intimidating. When you work with jailers and give them audiovisual equipment and recording equipment, when you move with technology, especially during COVID, and make sure that you have TVs whereby judges can be able to listen to cases wherever they are, then you actually move access to justice closer to people. So for us, it means that when we are investing, there needs to be the holistic investment that puts in both the software and the hardware components for us to be able to do this work.
All right. Thank you very much. I think, Evelyn, you speak to key aspects of empathy, you speak to confidentiality, and also the attitude. You don't see someone who has been raped and you're asking, is it true that you have been raped? I mean, the empathy aspect needs to come through. Dan, in just a minute as we conclude, On the issue of economics, the economics of agro-industrialization come in lots of impediments. The cultural aspect, for example, if land is communally owned, how much more can I be able to utilize that land? If it is aspects of mechanization, do I have the skills to even go ahead and do that? Are you looking at all those components as we look at the economics, and especially focusing on the sector that employs most of the people?
Thank you so much. I think definitely those are structural bottlenecks in the agricultural sector, which we cannot ignore if we are to move, the economy of this country forward. Definitely, as you do that, you look at the skills base and the needs of the majority of the people who are engaged in agriculture. These are women. And with the young population of Uganda, we need to strategically ensure that we target them deliberately. And as I said before, we need to invest more to increase their productivity, to increase their income level, to address the bottlenecks. And in other aspects, of course, there are contextual issues that we also need to focus on. For example, the refugee situation, the natural disasters. All these are linked to, climate change. We need to have, a holistic approach in order to address some of this. I just want to give you an example. Of course, at the moment, we are really, doing our level best in order to make women venture into productivity that has hitherto never been, they've never been there in those spaces. We have, for example, about 1,400 women engaged in cage fish farming in Bugiri. This is an interesting. It has, pulled these women out of poverty. Actually, those women are now even employing men in the value chain, and they are very happy about that. Yeah. In addition to that, with that, they have also decided to come together to form, a cooperative, Women Economic Empowerment Cooperative around fish and its value chain. This is something we can, it shows that it is really possible to get women out of poverty.
Oh, yes.
The other aspect, of course, is on, I don't know if some of you have been to Noya. We are working together with our partner private sector, where we've supported women to engage in fruit farming and cereals. It's unbelievable. Over 3,000 women, after engaging with their communities, with their men, they have been able to have been allocated land. They own the land. What are they doing on this land? They have put in place fruit farms, which is feeding into the juice industry, the value chain. And this money is going to them. It has totally changed the lives of these women. So if you are to do anything for this country, we need to target the most vulnerable majority who are women and engaged in a lot of unpaid work, care work. The cost of care work, unpaid care work is heavy. If we don't change that, then we want to remove, the resource, a big resource. You cannot leave a big resource of women to remain at home and take care of children and home. You can utilize that resource to do more productive things if you are to change this country.
Thank you.
And that is what we want to do as UN Women.
Key.
Working in collaboration with all other partners.
Okay.
Thank you.
Key is mindset change. The men have totally, some of the men have failed to agree to pay the unpaid care work, and that discussion always rubs some men the wrong way, but we will get there. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. Grace, just finally, on the issue still of gender financing, because clearly finances are very, very important. How can that be bettered, both from the development partners' perspective, government, and the private sector? Because when we talk about issues, gender equality, many a times we don't think about private sector. We're thinking about government and private, development partners only.
In the new strategic note of UN Women, we have strategically embedded a component on the private sector, and we've already started engaging the private sector in our programming and implementation process. For example, we are working with the Stanbic Bank together with the whole UN system to bring down the credit and financial management training among the women and girls in the vulnerable communities. So, for example, the credit facility is being extended through the NOYA program, where women will now attract credit at a lower interest rate and be able to boost their investment for increased yields and, of course, income. In terms of engaging not only government and the development partners in terms of financing, we are also engaging with the civil society agencies, and these have been brought on board in terms of implementation, programming, and delivering all these UN Women targets and interventions together with government. In terms of data, we are developing the citizen-generated data, which is data that is generated by the civil society agencies. And so, because you cannot do financing without evidence, so if the civil society enhanced in terms of generating quality data, then it will show where the gaps are in terms of financing gaps, and we'll be able to address these inclusively, not only as UN Women, but with the development partners and together with government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Working as a team. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a round of applause for our distinguished panel. We can go on and on because there are lots of issues to be able to discuss. It's only time that is against us. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Paul, Grace, and Claire, who joined us online. And I will officially dismiss you for now as we get to wind up this. Another round of applause for our panels, both the high-level panel and the technical panel as well, which was here. Another group that I would like us to give a round of applause to are the men. All the men in the house, please, just stand up. Just stand up. All the men who joined in this discussion. And the ladies, I want us to give a thunderous round of applause to the men who are championing gender equality and the discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen. You can take a seat. Thank you so much for coming through. Like we said, it is not about just the women for women, but it is also about the men who should be able to champion this. Give me just 2 minutes to have a poem from Davis. The poet is Davis here. And after Davis, of course, we'll get our closing remarks. So just 2 minutes to listen to this beautiful voice, but also the message there in this poem.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. My name is Davis the poet, and my friend here is called Chris Bahizi. We are so honored to be here. We are so honored to put a brick onto this wall and house that we are trying to build to be safe for everyone. So this poem is called No One Left Behind. See where we've come from. Remember what we've been through. Every step forward is like a step up the mountain in gluey boots. To stop the weed from giving fruit, we have to kill the root. To kill the root, we have to use the truth. Now close your eyes and visualize where we want to be. Don't sell yourself short. Paint the world you want to see. What do you want to see? Bear with me. I dream in color. I see women of valor, with voice, with choice, holding hands, singing, united we stand. Who run the world? Who run the world? I see women running the world, brightening the future of every child. I see them taking the lead in leadership, entrepreneurship, making changes and decisions in the nation, changing education and structures in our medication. Bear with me. I dream in color. I see women of valor making changes with no one left behind. I see markets in every communities with gender-free opportunities, gender biases stamped by personal abilities. I said, bear with me. I dream in color with us holding hands, feeling each other's pain, celebrating each other's gain is our way forward. But no woman must be left behind. Allow me to share the last poem. It's called Speak Up. Speak up for the changes to speed up. For those taking actions, please don't give up. The kitchen isn't your place if that is not where you want to be. A house is not a home if safety is just a dream. Everybody must be where they want to be. Clothes don't speak. Then why are you touching me? Sex ain't a qualification. Why are you asking it from me? Speak up for the changes to speed up. For those taking actions, please don't give up. Power is for all. It's not a gender role. Marriage is not a supreme goal. Why are you pressuring me? I need to go anywhere I want to go without the need of a man protecting me. Speak up for the changes to speed up. And for those taking actions, please don't give up. The world is changing fast. Why would I be considered last? Because I'm just a woman. I am not just a woman. I am a human being. Thank you very much. Peace by easy, everyone.
I think much bigger than that for Davis the poet. Yeah, I truthfully got some goosebumps on my body. And this is what I said, she's not just a woman, she's a human being as well. And when she talked about back in the times when the women's place was the kitchen and the labor suit, you only get to the kitchen if you have chosen to be there. We have women chefs, so it's okay, yes, you can be in the kitchen because you're earning from there, not because someone thinks there is a place that you can only be. And when he talks about speaking up, is sex a qualification? I am talking about, the bosses who always think that to be able to give a particular favor, it always has to go with sexual harassment. So once again, thank you, Davis the poet. That was 2 great poems coming through. And officially to close off this, allow me invite Benson, the operations manager, UN Women, for a vote of thanks. Let's give a round of applause to Benson as he gets to say bye-bye to us. All right, welcome, Benson.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Benson Okech, like she mentioned, and I'm here to give the vote of thanks on behalf of my head of office at the Kemi Ndieli. First of all, I would like to thank by appreciating the minister in absentia. I would like to recognize also our global director for PPID, Programs Policy and Intergovernmental Division, our dear RRC, the ambassadors who are still present, the heads of other UN organizations present, and of course, to all of you, our partners who have made this day a historic event. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank also my colleague, Dan Bazira, who has done a commendable job. Dan, wherever you are, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank your colleague, Mildred. You've both done a very commendable work. Thank you very much. And I think now that we have started the new SN, the phase of the new SN, we'll call upon all of you, our partners, to work with us so that we can successfully, implement the interventions that we have proposed 2022, 2025. And without wasting a lot of your time, I want to sincerely thank you for coming. Thank you again for coming, and God bless you as you go back. Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, we officially bring it to a close. As we get out, please remember to sign the equality wall, sign against that as your commitment to continuously looking at the discussions on gender equality and ensuring that you will do whatever it takes in your space and power to advance discussions about gender equality and ensuring that this come to pass. To our heads of bilateral missions and corporations, Sweden, the EU delegation, Austria, Norway, Germany, Belgium, Japan, Ireland, thank you so much for making it through and coming through. The heads of UN agencies and your designated officers, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, Dr. Corridor is here, the UN Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, UNDP, World Health Organization, and UN Women, thank you so much. To the government, the ministries, Office of the DPP, Ministry of Defense. I did see some uniformed men and women here. Uganda Police, thank you. And civil society actors, my colleagues, the media, Fourth Estate, thank you so much. And everyone else who has made it to this event. May God bless you and Johnny Mercies back home.